The college students' crude jokes filled the peaceful coffee shop as they surrounded her table. "Hey, wheelchair girl, did you get lost on your way to the disability center?" The leader taunted, deliberately blocking her path to the exit. They thought they were picking on a helpless woman. They had no idea they were disrespecting one of only 12 women to ever complete Navy SEAL training, and that her brotherhood never leaves anyone behind. For more powerful videos about our military heroes, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue to tell these important stories. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, 26 years old, sat perfectly still by the large window of Coastal Coffee, watching the afternoon crowd flow past on Ocean Boulevard. Her platinum blonde hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and her piercing steel blue eyes held a serenity that seemed unshakable. She wore a simple black fitted sweater and dark jeans, her lean, athletic build still evident despite the custom racing wheelchair that had been her companion for the past 2 years. The sleek carbon fiber and titanium of her racing chair gleamed under the coffee shop's warm lighting, but it was the small gold trident pin, barely visible on her collar, that told her real story. The Navy SEAL insignia, earned through the most brutal military training on Earth, marked her as one of the elite few who had survived the crucible that broke 80% of candidates. Sarah had chosen this particular seat for a reason. It offered clear sightlines to all entrances, positioned her back against a solid wall, and provided quick access to both the service counter and the main door. Old habits died hard, especially when those habits had kept you alive in hostile waters off enemy coastlines. The coffee shop was her refuge, a slice of normal American life that she'd fought to protect in 7 different countries. Here she could order a latte and a croissant, read a book, and pretend for a few hours that she was just another customer, not a decorated war hero, carrying more classified operations on her resume than most people had job interviews. But today, her peace was about to be shattered. At 3:22 p.m., the door burst open and Trouble walked in, wearing designer Greek letters and university sweatshirts. 5 members of Sigma Alpha Epsilon, from the local state university, swaggered through the entrance, their loud voices cutting through the peaceful atmosphere like foghorns in a quiet harbor. The leader was Tyler Morrison, 21 years old, a trust fund baby who had never faced real consequences for his actions. His perfectly styled hair and expensive clothes screamed privilege. Beside him stood his crew: Brad, the wannabe TikTok star always filming; Jake, the failed football player who peaked in high school; Connor, the rich kid's loyal follower; and Trent, whose cruel laugh had been terrorizing people since middle school. The coffee shop's atmosphere changed instantly. Families with children suddenly found their pastries intensely interesting. The elderly couple in the corner booth quietly asked for their check. A mother pulled her young daughter closer as the group passed their table, their loud profanity making her uncomfortable. But Sarah didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even look up from her book, The Art of War, by Sun Tzu. That stillness, that refusal to acknowledge their dominance, was like a red flag to a bull in Tyler's mind. The 5 fraternity brothers commandeered the center section of the coffee shop with the kind of entitlement that comes from never being told no. Their voices grew louder as they competed for attention, their crude jokes and offensive language making other customers shift uncomfortably in their seats. "This place smells like broke college students and failed dreams," Tyler announced, his voice carrying across the entire shop. His friends laughed, the sound harsh and grating in the family-friendly environment. Brad, phone already in hand and recording, was scanning the room for content. "Dude, look at this place. Total normie central. Who even drinks coffee here?" But it was Trent who first noticed Sarah, his eyes drawn to her blonde hair and the way she sat with such unusual composure. "Check out the wheels on that one," he said, pointing directly at her, with no attempt at discretion. Tyler followed his gaze, and his expression darkened when he realized Sarah wasn't paying them any attention. In his world, people noticed him. People feared him or wanted to be him. This calm indifference was an insult he couldn't tolerate. "Hey, Blondie," he called out, his voice booming across the coffee shop. "You deaf or just ignoring your betters?" Sarah turned a page in her book without looking up. The slight infuriated Tyler, more than a direct confrontation would have. He stood, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor, and walked over to Sarah's table. Up close, he could see the details he'd missed from across the room. The way her shoulders held themselves with perfect posture, the careful positioning of her hands, the fact that her stillness wasn't relaxation but readiness. But what he focused on was the wheelchair and the small pin on her collar, dismissing both as props for sympathy. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Look what we got here, boys." A little Navy girl playing dress-up. His friends joined him, forming a semicircle around Sarah's table. Other customers watched nervously, too frightened to intervene, but unable to look away. The teenage barista behind the counter looked scared, unsure whether to call her manager or hide in the back. "That's a cute little pin you got there, sweetheart," Tyler continued, pointing at the seal trident on her collar. "Where'd you get it?" "The military surplus store." Sarah finally looked up from her book, her steel blue eyes meeting Tyler's gaze with absolute calm. "I earned it," she said simply, her voice carrying a strange authority that made something cold run down Tyler's spine. The 5 students burst into laughter, the sound cruel and mocking in the quiet coffee shop. "Right," Brad wheezed, still recording with his phone. "I'm sure they're giving out participation trophies to disabled girls now." "What's next?" Jake added, flexing his muscles sarcastically. "Blind submarine captains? Deaf radio operators?" Their laughter grew louder, more vicious. Other customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, shame coloring their faces as they watched 5 grown men mock a disabled woman and did nothing to stop it. But across the street, Master Chief Petty Officer Rick Santos was fighting to control his temper. The 38-year-old SEAL instructor was off duty, enjoying a quiet afternoon, when he'd noticed something the college kids had missed entirely. That wasn't just any wheelchair. It was a custom racing chair that cost more than most people's cars. And that pin on her collar wasn't from a surplus store. It was a real SEAL trident, the kind you earn through blood, sweat, and near-death experiences. More importantly, he'd caught a glimpse of something else. When Sarah had reached for her drink, a small tattoo on her wrist that made his blood run cold. An anchor with the words, "The only easy day was yesterday." He knew what that meant. Sarah closed her book gently, placing it on the table with deliberate care. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying the same authority that had once commanded respect in military briefing rooms, "I think you should return to your table." Tyler's face flushed red. Did this cripple just give me an order? Without warning, he grabbed the handles of Sarah's wheelchair and tilted it backward just enough to make her grip the armrests to keep her balance. "Let me tell you something, Navy girl. This is my town, my coffee shop, and my rules. And my rules say you show respect to your betters." The coffee shop gasped collectively. An elderly veteran at the counter started to rise, but his wife pulled him back down, terrified of what might happen. The teenage barista retreated further behind the register. Sarah's voice remained perfectly calm, though her eyes had gone ice cold. "Sir, I'm going to ask you once to release my chair." "What?" Tyler sneered, his grip tightening. "You going to roll over my feet?" That's when he made his fatal error. With a violent shove, he pushed the wheelchair backward, sending it rolling into the window with a crash that rattled the glass. Sarah's coffee toppled, spilling across the table and onto her lap. The impact jarred something loose from beneath Sarah's chair. A small magnetic case that she kept attached to the frame for emergencies broke open as it hit the floor, spilling its contents across the coffee shop tiles. Military ribbons and medals scattered like confetti across the floor. Navy achievement medals, bronze stars with valor, purple hearts, and others that most civilians wouldn't recognize. But that told a story of incredible heroism in the world's most dangerous waters. And among them, something that made every person in the coffee shop draw a sharp breath. A folded American flag, the kind given to families at military funerals. But this flag was different. It was signed by admirals, by members of Congress, by the Secretary of the Navy himself. But it was the small placard that had fallen with the flag that made Master Chief Santos's hands shake as he reached for his phone. It read, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, Navy SEAL, SEAL Team 6, 47 Combat Operations, Wounded in Action, Operation Neptune's Shield, 2022. The silence that followed was deafening. Santos slipped outside quietly, his fingers dialing a number he knew by heart. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Commander Hayes. Sir, this is Master Chief Santos. Sir, I'm at Coastal Coffee on Ocean Boulevard, about 10 miles from the base. Sir, there's a situation here involving one of our people. A pause. Explain. Sir, there's a SEAL here being harassed by college students. She's in a wheelchair, sir. They're mocking her service record. The medals are scattered on the floor. The silence stretched so long that Santos wondered if the call had dropped. When the commander finally spoke, his voice was cold as the Arctic Ocean. Santos, you said SEAL. What's the name on the flag? Santos squinted through the window at the small placard on the floor. Mitchell, sir. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell. The intake of breath was audible. Jesus Christ. Thompson, listen to me very carefully. Do not let anyone leave that coffee shop. Do not let them touch. Lieutenant Mitchell again. We are en route. Sir, how many should I expect? All of them, Master Chief. All of them. Inside the coffee shop, the situation was escalating rapidly. Tyler, emboldened by the lack of intervention from other customers and completely oblivious to the significance of what lay scattered on the floor, had grabbed Sarah's wheelchair again and was shaking it like a toy. Look at this, he sneered, pointing at the ribbons and medals on the floor. Our little Navy girl likes to play dress-up. What's next? Going to tell us you swam with the sharks? Sarah's hands gripped the armrests of her wheelchair, her knuckles white with controlled tension. But her voice remained steady. Those ribbons represent missions conducted in defense of this country. You're disrespecting something you don't understand. Missions? Connor laughed, pulling out his phone to record. Lady, the only mission you've been on is a mission to Starbucks. What none of them noticed was the change in the coffee shop's atmosphere. It started subtly, the dimming of afternoon light as vehicles began pulling into the parking lot. One by one, black SUVs and pickup trucks filled every available space, their occupants barely visible through tinted windows. Jake was the first to notice, glancing nervously toward the window. Tyler. We got company. Tyler was too busy enjoying his dominance to pay attention. Yeah, so what? Probably soccer moms. But when he finally looked outside, his cocky grin vanished. 30 black vehicles had surrounded Coastal Coffee, their occupants stepping out with military precision. These weren't soccer moms. These were Navy SEALs from multiple teams, and they moved with the coordinated efficiency of people who had conducted raids in the world's most hostile waters. The doors opened, and out stepped men and women in civilian clothes, jeans, boots, polo shirts. But there was no mistaking their bearing. These were warriors, elite warriors, SEALs who had conducted operations in every dangerous corner of the world, and they moved with the quiet confidence of people who had faced enemy fire and emerged victorious. Master Chief Santos, still on the phone, caught the eye of the lead officer and pointed towards Sarah's table. Inside, Tyler's bravado evaporated like sea foam. "What the hell?" he whispered, watching as the SEALs formed a perimeter around the building. The front door opened, and Commander Michael Hayes walked in. He was a man in his late 40s, with silver threading through his dark hair, and the kind of presence that commanded instant attention. Behind him came his command team, and behind them, more Navy SEALs than the small coffee shop could comfortably hold. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They simply filled the space around Sarah's table, forming a human wall of muscle and military precision that made the 5 college students look like children who had wandered into the wrong war room. Commander Hayes surveyed the scene, the scattered medals, the spilled coffee, the 5 pale young men who had been tormenting one of his people. His expression was calm, but his eyes burned with the cold fire of someone who had ordered strikes on enemy positions. He looked down at Sarah, and his entire demeanor softened. "Lieutenant Mitchell," he said, his voice carrying the respect of one warrior greeting another. "Are you injured?" Sarah straightened in her wheelchair, automatically coming to attention, despite being seated. "No, sir, just some spilled coffee." The commander's gaze moved to the scattered ribbons and medals on the floor, taking in the bronze stars, the purple hearts, the Navy Achievement Medals that few people ever earned. "I see your service record has been displayed." "Yes, sir." Accidentally. Commander Hayes knelt down carefully, gathering the medals and ribbons with the reverence they deserved. As he did, he began to speak, his voice carrying to every corner of the now silent coffee shop. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are in the presence of one of our nation's finest warriors. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell served 3 combat deployments with SEAL Team 6. She conducted 47 combat operations behind enemy lines, rescued captured service members, and saved more lives than we can count." He stood, holding the medals like they were made of platinum. 2 years ago, Lieutenant Mitchell was leading a maritime rescue operation to extract a captured pilot from a terrorist stronghold on the Somali coast. Her team had successfully reached the pilot, but as they were extracting, they were ambushed by enemy forces, outnumbered 30 to 1, with no hope of reinforcement. The coffee shop was so quiet that the only sound was the gentle hum of the espresso machine. Tyler, Brad, Jake, Connor, and Trent stood frozen, trapped by the wall of Navy SEALs surrounding them. "Lieutenant Mitchell could have saved herself," the commander continued, his voice thick with emotion. "She could have escaped with most of her team. Instead, she chose to stay behind and hold off the enemy, while her sailors and the rescued pilot got to safety. She fought for 4 hours alone against overwhelming odds." Sarah closed her eyes, the memory still painful after all these years. The sound of gunfire, the taste of salt water and blood, the weight of the decision that had cost her everything but saved everyone else. "When we finally fought our way back to Lieutenant Mitchell's position," Commander Hayes said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute truth, "we found her unconscious, floating in shark-infested waters. She had lost both legs below the knee from an IED explosion, but she was still clutching her weapon, still facing the enemy." A woman at the counter began to cry. The elderly veteran who had tried to intervene earlier stood at attention, tears streaming down his face. "That pilot she saved," the commander continued. "He has 2 children now. Every sailor who made it out that day has gone home to their families, has lived to serve their country another day, because of Lieutenant Mitchell's sacrifice." He turned to face the 5 college students, his expression hardening like cooling steel. "So when you gentlemen decided to mock her wheelchair, to disrespect her service, to treat her like she was nothing, You weren't just bullying a disabled woman. You were insulting one of America's finest Navy SEALs. Tyler tried to speak, his voice cracking. We, we didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't care to know, Commander Hayes replied coldly. You saw someone you thought was weak, and you decided that gave you the right to be cruel. The lead SEAL stepped forward, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to commanding the world's most elite warriors. My name is Commander Hayes, commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Group 1. Lieutenant Mitchell served under my command for 6 years. She is the finest SEAL I have ever had the privilege to lead, and she is family to every person in this room. He gestured to the 30-plus SEALs, now filling the coffee shop. These men and women have served with her, fought with her, and would follow her into the most hostile waters without hesitation. And when we heard that 5 cowards were disrespecting her in a public restaurant, we decided to pay a visit. Tyler looked around desperately, taking in the faces of the Navy SEALs surrounding him. These weren't weekend warriors or college ROTC students. These were the real deal, men and women who had seen combat in every hostile corner of the world, who could end conflicts before they started. Look, we didn't mean anything by it, he stammered, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine fear. Joking? Master Chief Santos stepped forward, his voice deadly quiet. You think a warrior's sacrifice is a joke? Sarah finally spoke, her voice cutting through the tension like a laser-guided torpedo. Commander, it's all right. They didn't understand. But Commander Hayes shook his head. Ma'am, with all due respect, ignorance is not an excuse for cruelty. These young men need to understand what they've done. He turned back to the 5 students, his voice taking on the tone of a commander, briefing his troops. Lieutenant Mitchell didn't just lose her legs in that ambush. She lost her fiancé, Petty Officer First Class James Rodriguez, who died covering her escape route. She lost her future as an active duty SEAL, her ability to serve in the capacity she loved more than life itself. The commander's voice grew harder. She could have taken a medical retirement, collected her pension, lived comfortably off her disability benefits. Instead, she chose to live quietly, without fanfare, without demanding the recognition she deserves. She works part-time at the VA hospital, counseling other wounded veterans, giving them hope when they think their lives are over. Sarah's cheeks flushed. She had never wanted her story told like this, never wanted to be held up as an example. But the commander wasn't finished. So when you 5 decided to make fun of her wheelchair, to mock the pin she earned with blood, you weren't just bullying a disabled woman. You were attacking everything that makes this country worth defending. The silence in the coffee shop was complete. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working, gathering at the service window to listen. Tyler, his face now ashen, looked down at Sarah with genuine remorse. Ma'am, Lieutenant, I'm sorry. I didn't know. If I had known, if you had known, you might have acted differently, Sarah replied, her voice measured and calm. But the real question is, why does it take knowledge of my service record for you to treat me with basic human dignity? The question hung in the air like an indictment. Tyler had no answer, because there was no good answer. Commander Hayes stepped closer to the 5 students, his presence commanding their complete attention. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to Lieutenant Mitchell properly. You're going to pay for every drink in this coffee shop today, and then you're going to leave. And you're never going to show your faces here again. And if we don't? Connor asked, trying to summon some of his earlier bravado. The commander smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then you'll discover why Navy SEALs are called the quiet professionals. We don't make threats. We eliminate targets. The threat was delivered so quietly that it was almost conversational, but every person in the coffee shop understood its weight. These weren't men and women who bluffed. These were warriors who had eliminated terrorist leaders and hostile combatants with precision strikes. Tyler was the first to break. He pulled out his wallet with shaking hands, extracting every bill he had and placing them on Sarah's table. "Lieutenant, ma'am, I'm sorry. I'm truly, deeply sorry. We were wrong, completely wrong." His friends followed suit, emptying their wallets and muttering apologies that sounded genuine in their terror. But Sarah wasn't finished with them. She wheeled her chair closer, looking each of them in the eye. "I want you to understand something. This wheelchair isn't a symbol of weakness. It's a symbol of sacrifice. Every veteran you see, whether they're in a chair, walking with a cane, or dealing with invisible wounds, has given something for your freedom to sit in this coffee shop and drink your lattes in peace." Her voice grew stronger, carrying the authority of someone who had commanded respect in the world's most dangerous waters. "The next time you see someone who looks different, someone who moves differently, someone who seems like an easy target, I want you to remember this moment. Remember that you have no idea what battles they've fought or what prices they've paid." Brad, tears actually streaming down his face, nodded frantically. "Yes, ma'am. We'll remember. We promise." Commander Hayes watched the exchange with pride. Even in a wheelchair, even outnumbered and alone, Sarah commanded the situation with the same leadership that had made her legendary among Navy SEALs. The 5 students gathered their belongings and headed for the door, their earlier swagger replaced by genuine shame. At the threshold, Tyler turned back. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice barely audible, "thank you for your service, and I'm sorry for what you lost." Sarah nodded once, accepting his apology with the grace of someone who had learned to carry loss without bitterness. After they left, the coffee shop erupted in applause. Customers who had sat silent during the confrontation now stood, clapping and cheering for the woman they had watched being humiliated just minutes before. The elderly veteran from the counter approached, his eyes wet with tears. "Ma'am, I served in the Navy during Vietnam, 2 tours on destroyers. But what you did, what you sacrificed, that's the kind of courage they write about in history books." Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile she'd managed all day. "We all serve in our own way, sir. Your service matters just as much as mine." The coffee shop's manager, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, bustled over with tears streaming down her face. "Lieutenant, your drinks are free here forever. It's the least I can do." But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Master Chief Santos approached her table. He stood at perfect attention and rendered a crisp salute. "Lieutenant Mitchell, Master Chief Santos, Naval Special Warfare. Ma'am, it's an honor to meet you. Your reputation precedes you throughout the entire SEAL community." Sarah returned the salute from her wheelchair, the simple gesture carrying the weight of shared service and mutual respect. "At ease, Master Chief, and thank you for making that call." Commander Hayes and his team began to file out of the coffee shop, their mission accomplished. But before leaving, the commander placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Lieutenant, you know you don't have to hide who you are. The world needs to see that heroes come in all forms." Sarah looked around the coffee shop at the faces filled with newfound respect and admiration, at the young Master Chief who had stood up for her, at the elderly veteran who understood her sacrifice. "Maybe you're right, sir. Maybe it's time to stop hiding." As the SEAL team departed, the coffee shop slowly returned to normal. But everything was different now. Sarah was no longer just another customer. She was a hero, a warrior, a woman who had given everything for her country and asked for nothing in return. The teenage barista approached shyly, refilling Sarah's coffee with trembling hands. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say, you're the bravest person I've ever met." Sarah smiled. "Bravery isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right, even when you are afraid. Remember that. As the afternoon wore on, word spread throughout the small coastal town. By evening, there would be a steady stream of visitors to Coastal Coffee, veterans wanting to shake her hand, families wanting to thank her for her service, young people wanting to hear her story. Sarah had come to the coffee shop looking for anonymity, for a place where she could blend in and be ordinary. But sometimes extraordinary people can't hide forever. Sometimes their light is too bright to be dimmed by circumstance or injury, or the cruelty of those who don't understand sacrifice. And sometimes, just sometimes, the world needs to be reminded that heroes walk among us every day, rolling through life with quiet dignity, carrying the weight of service with grace, and teaching us all what true courage looks like. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed someone being bullied and wished you had the courage to speak up? Have you ever been underestimated because of something that made you look different or vulnerable? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone else who needs to hear it. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that heroes come in all forms, hit that subscribe button, because everyone deserves to have their story told, and everyone deserves to be seen for who they really are, not just what they appear to be.